Welcome back to Visualizing Data for Libraries. This tutorial covers creating a motion scatter chart with pie charts. We're starting off with one of the more complex visualizations, but you'll get a wide coverage of features this way. I've organized the Tableau data a bit more, so there are less fields to scroll through and they can be found by category. We will start by building the scatter chart. The first thing to consider is which data you want on your axes. Which data might be influenced by which other data. These fields need to be measures, which are essentially numerical data. For this tutorial, we will examine the correlation between average salaries for non-supervising librarians and the total number of borrowers. Drag the average salaries field to columns in the top right pane. You will need to expand the folder for staff to access it. To take advantage of your groupings, I recommend collapsing the folder again at this point. Next, drag the total borrowers from the users folder to rows in the same pane. This will show on the vertical or side axis. We now have the skeleton of a scatter chart and can choose it from the chart options in the Show Me pane. If you don't see chart options, toggle them on by clicking Show Me in the top right. The scatter chart is already selected, but if it weren't, you would click this one with the circles and pluses. Be forewarned that Tableau will flip your columns and rows when you select it, so you will need to put them back in the right place by dragging them to the appropriate location. After this, the Show Me pane can be distracting and it covers the data, so toggle it off. As you can see, the values are astronomical and they don't match what we saw in the data. That's because by default, Tableau is summing data. Fix this by clicking on the arrow to the right of each field and selecting Measure Average. Now the values align with those we saw in the Excel file. Next, change the mark shape to pie and determine a field for your data points. This needs to be a dimension, which is data that mathematic operations cannot be performed on. We'll use the library so we can get detailed information about the measures for each library. Drag the library field to the detail box in the right pane. Our next element needs to be a measure, and it should be something which may also correlate with the other fields we have already used and which is closely tied to the data we will use for the pie chart sections. We will use the total collection size, so drag that value onto the size box in the right pane. Once again, change the aggregation type to average. As you can see, the size of the circles is too small for the pie charts we will be configuring to be legible. Change the size by clicking on the size box and moving the slider to the right until the circles are, on average, large enough to result in a meaningful display. For greater control over the size of the circles, click on the arrow to the right of the legend title. It's hidden until you mouse over it. Then click on Edit Sizes. One change you may wish to make is to select by range from the Sizes Vary dropdown. Also, sometimes Tableau seems to use the sum aggregation even after you've selected average, so it might be necessary to check the start value for range and end value for range and put in the actual start and end values by hand. In this case, Tableau has correctly picked up these values. Hit OK. At this point, the circles overlap, losing the detail. Add a border to them to make them easier to distinguish by clicking on the color box and choosing a color under Effects, Border. Now let's add detail to our pie charts. We want to break the collections down by collection type. So drag the collection type from dimensions to the color box. And again, Tableau has mistaken my attempt to drag for an attempt to rename the field. So hit escape and let's try that again. If the colors aren't suitable, change them by clicking on the color box, edit colors, or the arrow to the right of the legend and hit edit colors. Select a different palette from the select color palette dropdown, or just stick with automatic. You can also click on a data item and choose a different color from the displayed palette for the selected data item by clicking the color swatch. Be sure to change the color for the data item whose color you just used, so each item has a unique color. The pie chart is showing now, but all the slices are the same size. Let's use that second column from our pivot to add detail to the pie chart. So we'll grab collection size and drag it to the angle box. We've got a scatter chart with pie charts now, but the data points are essentially horizontal and vertical. This is because of the wide range of values for the total borrower's axis. We need to use a logarithmic scale to correct this. Right-click on the y-axis and choose Edit Axis. About halfway down, check the logarithmic box. You can also rename the axis here if appropriate. You may wish to do so for conciseness, especially given that our motion chart will display the number of borrowers at the time the data was reported rather than averaged across time. At this point, we can also see that the data points don't start until nearly halfway up the screen. So let's eliminate unused space and increase data density by unchecking the option for Include Zero. X out of the dialog box. Reviewing our work thus far, we can see a great number of points with a 0 salary. These equate to unanswered questionnaire items and should be filtered out. While it would have been possible to do this in Excel during the prep stage, you might want the records for other visualizations, so keep them in Excel to maximize your reusability and filter them through Tableau. To do so, click on the arrows next to each measure in both the Marks pane and the Columns and Rows pane and choose Filter. Those fields which don't include 0 values won't need to be adjusted, but it's worthwhile taking a look at each one. At the same time, let's go ahead and change the aggregation type here to average. And filter, and we'll go to the At Least button and change it to 1 to exclude our 0 values, and hit OK. You may wish to readjust the pie chart size at this point. Move the dialog box out of the way so you can see the effect of your changes. We're nearly done. Let's animate this chart. Drag the year field to the Pages pane in the top middle of the window. A year navigation box has now appeared to the right, and clicking on an arrow to the right or left of the stop button will play the animation. Adding a trend line can help us see the rate of change of salary to borrower size. Click on Analysis, Trend Lines, Show Trend Lines. A multitude of colored lines show, one for each type of collection, and they drop off the screen. Once again, click on Analysis, Trend Lines, and this time choose Edit Trend Lines. Because we used a logarithmic scale, we need to change the trend line to use an exponential model type by checking its corresponding radio button. Under Options, include the following fields as factors, uncheck the box for collection type. That way we see just the one line for the overall annual trend. OK out. Right-click on the Sheet tab and choose Rename. The sheet name you choose will be the default title, but keep it concise so you can fit in multiple sheets while still being able to recognize the tab. I'll rename this tab to Borrowers and Collection, and then I'll edit the sheet title by right-clicking and choosing Edit Title. The title should again be concise, but clarify to viewers what they are seeing. I'll call this Salary, Borrowers, and Collection, dash year, and on a second line, I'll add collection by type and total size. Edit the formatting as you see fit with the font size, and font color dropdowns, and the font style and alignment buttons. So I will bold the top line of the title and decrease the second line by a few points. OK out. You can also scale your chart to fit your screen by dragging on the corner of the axis and pulling that out to the edge of your screen to take advantage of your screen space. Let's do a last bit of cleanup. Since our salaries are monetary, we'll change the formatting to currency. Click on the arrow to the right of the salary field in columns and choose Format. In the left pane, on the Axis tab under Scale, click on the arrow to the right of Numbers. We don't need precision to the cent for our visualization, so we will choose Currency Custom and change the decimal places to 0 in order to conserve space, and click out of the dialog box. Go to the Pane tab and do the same thing for numbers under Default. This will automatically update the formatting for numbers under totals and grand totals. Mouse over a data point to review the tooltip and see if any other data needs to be formatted. Everything else is fine, so just rename the axis to remove the redundant average. Save your file, and we have finished the motion scatter chart with pie charts.